Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker. One of the main responsibilities, and indeed I would suggest the most important responsibilities of any government, is to ensure law and order prevails in our society. And in having that responsibility, we empower and mandate those that serve in our criminal justice agencies to enforce the law that the parliamentarians on behalf of the people set. And so it's with that in mind that this motion has been brought forward in my name and in my colleague's name, Mr Mervyn Storey, who leads for our members on the policing board. And it came into sharp focus this summer when it came to the sentencing of an individual for the murder of Detective Garda Adrian Donoghue. He was killed in County Louth in January of 2013, murdered in the line of duty, 41 years of age, married, 2 young children, and of course in referencing his killing we remember his family today. But the sentence that was administered as a result of that murder to a citizen of this country, Aaron Brady from New Road in Crossmaglen, he was found guilty of capital murder, and with that conviction comes with it a mandatory minimum sentence in the Irish Republic of 40 years. Quite rightly, the response to that came from a number of quarters, drawing into sharp focus what our sentencing framework is here in Northern Ireland when it comes to the murder of police officers. Our First Minister rightly responded to that sentencing decision, said that victims deserve justice in Northern Ireland, and we often have heard the anguished voice of those that have been left bereaved as a result of a loved one being taken from them. The First Minister rightly said that there must be a strong deterrent when it comes to those that would consider shooting, killing, by whatever means, those that serve in our criminal justice agencies. The Police Federation, in response, also said that there is an urgent need for the sentencing framework here in Northern Ireland to be addressed, to recognise the situation that prevails in this jurisdiction. We also have the case of PC Andrew Harper, again killed on duty, and those that were sentenced in respect of that killing, one receiving 16 years and 2 that were aged 18 got 13 years. And of course the pleas there from the widow of how the injustice that has been felt because early release in those situations could be granted after 2/3 of those sentences have been delivered. And there the campaign is now taking place called Andrew's Law, seeking to have a minimum sentence that is put in place for the killing of a police officer. And so whenever we look at those 2 examples, we of course in this part of the world can think of countless police officers in the past who lost their lives, that were killed in the line of duty. We can think of soldiers that were killed, and we can think of prison officers that were killed. And then we can think about the sentence that was administered to them. Of course, it's the reason why my party, one of them, opposed the Belfast Agreement. One of the most immoral decisions and injustices inflicted upon the victims of those that were murdered was to have the perpetrators granted early release. That was one of the reasons why I wanted the Belfast Agreement to be defeated, because of the injustice that was carried out upon those that were victims and those that lost their lives as a result of that decision to grant early release to those perpetrators. And so when it comes to sentencing, there is an impact not just on the immediate family, but on the wider community. And there is also a distinction to be drawn upon those that serve our community as public servants. And police officers and prison officers and those that serve in the forces of law and order, they come with it a particular risk because of the individuals that they have to go out and face. I think most recently of the excellent operation that's been carried out against the new IRA. I think about those police officers that had to go through the doors and the premises and engage in all of that, who've had to gather the evidence. And obviously, as that case goes through, I'm mindful of those family members who worry because of their loved ones that have been involved in that. And so they deserve to have the protection, I believe, of the law when it comes to how people are sentenced. And whenever we look then at our own sentencing framework here in Northern Ireland, we have the lowest starting tariff for murder sentences of any region in the United Kingdom, starting at 12 years. And then when we look at the lowest starting point where a victim is in public service, it's 15 or 16 years. And that represents half the penalty in England and Wales, and is also lower than the 20-year tariff operated in Scotland, and of course in the Irish Republic, the 40-year mandatory minimum sentence. And that is why we then need to have... I will, briefly.
I thank the member for drawing this out. Could I also point out that it is not a mandatory minimum sentence served. It is a mandatory minimum tariff of 40 years, but there is actually automatic 25% remission of that sentence for good behaviour whilst in prison. So the end point is 30 years, which is more comparable with our end point, which is 25 years.
The Minister can elaborate later when she's got considerable time in dealing with this area. I want to get on to the Department for Justice and the Minister's role in this in due course, but I just want to again highlight why those that serve in our criminal justice agencies require that additional protection. Attacks on prison officers in the prison establishments, 166 in the past 3 years. How many of them have been brought through the court system, and what has been the penalty whenever it comes to the punishment for them? And whenever then we consider where we are with the current sentencing framework, former Minister Claire Sugden, I see here today, commissioned a review in 2016. Then we had a public consultation in October 2019, which was completed in February of this year. That would be 6 months ago that the consultation process was completed, some 4 years after the then Minister commissioned a review into the sentencing, which is regarded as the most significant review of sentencing from 2005. And that covers a wide range of areas that need to be considered as part of a review of the sentencing framework. But we're not keeping up with the pace of changes elsewhere. We've had the Assaults on Emergency Workers Act, and that covers, and I know colleagues are going to mention, our hospital staff, our NHS workers and other emergency workers, which I haven't touched on as my main contribution. But we know that in every year for the last number of years, over 400 ambulance staff have been subject to attacks. And we think about those reports of incidences that take place in our hospital settings, where our nurses are being subject to attacks. And so I know my colleague, Mr Frew, is going to speak further around that. This motion deals with the wide gambit of sentencing that we need to have in place for our emergency workers. And so whenever I look at the process that we've followed, some 6 months later, we're still waiting on the Department of Justice to come forward with the new sentencing framework. And that's why I regret the amendment that's been put forward, in that it removes the call for tougher sentences. Why not? I appreciate it recognises the seriousness of these offences, but why is the Alliance Party not able to call for tougher sentences? Why did that need to be removed? And I'm sure they'll elaborate in respect of that. And the amendment highlights this sentencing review process that's been taking place. And so I accept, in terms of the substance of what the amendment is saying, the issue I have is that 6 months later we're still waiting on it. Now, I'm sure with this motion being the catalyst for the Department to look at this, we're going to see hopefully a positive announcement from the Minister for Justice later in her contribution as to when we're going to have the review carried out. But it needs to be carried out. I've only 1 minute left, so I'll not, but it needs to be brought forward as a matter of urgency, so that this issue can be dealt with. Then there's the debate of minimum sentencing and allowing then judicial discretion. And I have no difficulty with judicial discretion, but it's always within the parameters of the legislative framework that we have to set down. And so we need to send a very powerful signal that we back our emergency workers, we have their back whenever they're being attacked, and that we have an appropriate legislative framework in place that reflects the gravity of the offences committed to them, so that the sentence that is administered gives them the support that I believe that they should have. So I would hope that today we will send the right signal and support those emergency workers, and that we will see movement coming from the Department of Justice and this Minister, that it will be brought forward as a matter of urgency the outworkings of that sentencing review, and then we'll consider the substance of what's actually being proposed. Thank you, Principal Deputy Speaker.